you have new coaches coming in or new student athletes, how do you welcome them to that culture and keep it the same things?
I can start just on the hiring side. So what I referenced before now becomes, so we call them the 6 I's. That becomes the lens through which we filter people's candidacy. So as we are evaluating them through the interview process as to whether or not we feel like they're a good fit for that, and we'll ask them some very specific questions around those themes. But the other part of it is every finalist that I sit down with, I talk them through the entire thing and explain it to them because I want them to understand it, to be able to ask questions, and I want them to self-select into what we're about. You can never guarantee that it's like automatically a perfect fit, but I think it's really helpful to have something concrete to reference in the hiring process because you're hedging your bets that you're gonna get somebody who's gonna assimilate far more easily. Everybody has a learning curve, but I think it's really helpful when you do it that way. And I know we have head coaches in the room, and I would venture to guess that they use something similar when they're evaluating recruits. You're never evaluating a recruit just on their talent alone. You are evaluating a recruit based on how they're going to fit into your culture, and that's all part of the assessment. So I think the first step is understanding what that is and being very clear about it, and then that gives you a lens through which to evaluate others.
Yeah, and I would say that being clear about what is important to you, and obviously you all are very clear, right? You've got those 6 points, and that is really important for how you do welcome people into your family, your community, your department, whatever it may be. And sometimes you can get blinded by what you think is talent. Or somebody telling you that this is you've got to hire this person, right? Or maybe you knew them before, or maybe it's a recruit, right? Like they're really, 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 really good, but you don't see as clearly as you should X, Y, and Z. And so I think it's important as well that you don't do this in a silo, that you don't, if you're the AD, that you're not thinking, I just need to hire X, Y, and Z. Or if you're a coach, that you don't share with your assistant coaches, like, I need you to go see this person, because maybe I'm seeing what I want to see, right? And you want to make sure that if your culture is expansive enough, then you're all looking at it, with the appropriate lens that you should. I'll just tell you a quick story where this didn't happen, and we learned after the fact, was at another institution where I was when we had football, had a football head coach that was killing me he had not been doing well, was killing me on the admission side, right? Like, we've gotta let this kid in, we've gotta let this kid in. And I kept going back saying, like, okay, I see the stats, this is a really good football player, but I also see the transcripts, and what about this? Things like, okay, he may be an okay student, but I also see, and this is true, 35 absences, right? Like, did you find out a little bit about this? Well, anyway, we ended up compromising, taking some of these students, did not have a good year. After the season, the coach said to me, he's like, I made a mistake. He's like, I needed to see the bigger picture. And he's like, I can never build a program like this before. And I learned, right, this was a little bit earlier in my career, I learned that I needed to not compromise, for looking at just one thing, which was talent in this particular case. So I think if you are going to have the culture that you want, you do have to be consistent. And in many cases, sometimes you need to check yourself, right? And that means bringing somebody else into it. So whether it's your deputy AD or you're a head coach, it's your associate head coach or one of the other assistants or whatever, always, more than just yourself trying to work on something to kind of just double check that you're doing the right thing for your culture.
So my boss, who's president of Morgan State, always says that the biggest indicator of success is how a person comes in to an organization and how they leave an organization. We're by no means perfect in that space, but some of the things that we're trying to put in place for our staff, students, we started this past year an onboarding process. Essentially, campus HR, they do their thing. You know, they have their own process, which you can't, you know, there's only so much you can do there, right? So we try to figure out a way that, okay, at least we can do our own. Okay, these are our values, this is what the athletic department is, this is how they set up, this is how you do X, Y, and Z. And then we have a team of people, like Mother Simone over here with the camera, and meeting with each new employee, whether it's a coach, whether it's a staff member, and kind of just going over some of the basics, going over some of the things that a new employee would need to know. As far as checking in and maintaining culture, after we do retreats and things like that, each year for me, especially being new, still relatively new in the role, is a check-in, kind of, okay, so this year we did a check-in. So 2 years ago we said this is who we are, this is what we want to do. How do we feel like we're doing that now? Like, where are we in that space? Do we feel like we're accomplishing what we want to accomplish? Do we feel like the communication issues that we had then, have we fixed those, or are we still working on those? Also, you know, expectations. You gotta let people know what the expectations are. So what you're holding them accountable for, because part of maintaining culture is holding people accountable to what your expectations are. So those are just some of the things that we do at Morgan, and will continue to do and improve on to try to maintain culture. But things happen, you know, that could take you down. You build up culture, and then you take a slope. For example, let's say COVID, for example. COVID could just totally, everything you were doing, all the momentum you had, shut it down, and you have to rebuild. We unfortunately had a moment at Morgan State when we lost one of our senior staff members last year, who passed away in the middle of the year. We were headed that trajectory, right? Building culture new, and that just takes the wind out of your sail, because you have to figure everything out again. And so we're in that space where, you know, we're trying to figure things out and moving culture forward. But you got to check in on it every year, and you check on your people every year.
Perfect. So for the next 2 minutes, as you all sit here, everyone asks you, on your team, like, have there been moments where your culture has been challenged, and how have you dealt with it? Because you're building a culture within your team, within your program. So how have you maintained it when your culture has been challenged?
Oh, for AZ's here, talking about one of my favorites here is, how are you leading leaders? It's really easy to lead in any other thing, you know, another way, but how do you lead us? How are you taking on our generation and the generation behind us who have varying opinions, right, and different cultures that they come from? So how are you leading leaders?
Well, I'm gonna push back. You said it's easy to lead, because I don't think that's accurate. So from my perspective, when I believe that leadership is a skill, research bears that out now, right? So if it's a skill, you can develop it like any other skill. So all of you are in an athletic context. You're recruiting an athlete out of high school, and you're projecting who that athlete is gonna be, what kind of contributor they're gonna be by the time they're a senior on your team, right? And along the way, you plan to develop skills, right? Because nobody who's coming to you as a freshman in most cases is a perfectly baked athlete at that point. So you need to help them along and develop skills. I think leadership is the same way. And when I think about like leading others, or more importantly, like developing others, because that's the lens through which I think about it, you need reps and you need feedback, right? In the same way that you would do it for your athletes. And so thinking about consciously letting go and letting others take the lead is the reps, right? Giving people opportunities there. In some scenarios, you're gonna have to let them fail. Pick your scenarios wisely, right? But when you let them fail, then you have to wrap around with the coaching feedback and then help them to learn and grow. That's how they develop that skill set. And so I'm sitting here knowing that there's a lot of you in this room who sit in meetings with me, so hopefully call me out on my BS if I'm not stating this correctly. But I really do try to let people own their areas. I try to tell them as much as I know in the moment, but I try to follow them, if that makes sense. And is a really important part of leading others and developing others as leaders.
Yeah, and I'd say I try to observe and then share some feedback, right? So I have people who say to me all the time, like, I love to go to our contests, and some people will say, they're like, do you go to every home contest? And I say, I don't. I said, but, I mean, first of all, I like to watch our athletes and our coaches compete. I like to win too. I like to go to more that we win, but when I'm there, it gives me the opportunity to see the people who are leading our teams in their world, right? So if I don't go, I don't know how, as the leader of them, I could give them feedback, right? Let's just say it's a job review at the end of the year. I could look at their, their wins and losses, and I just don't think that's fair to just say, okay, here's the outcome. I need to see you doing your work, so that I can say, like it seems like so-and-so on your team reacts really well to you, or it seems like every time we get in a stressful situation, you shut down and I can see your team reacting to that. And if I'm going to help them as leaders, I've got to be there a little bit, not all the time, and watching a practice occasionally, or in contests, so that I can share the feedback. And then also, especially because all of us are leading young people, right? Recognizing it's different how you lead those that you coach or work with, and then how you lead the student athletes. I mean, it's not so different that you need to be a different person, but they're young people that are very, very influenced, by the people that they see as determining their playing time, that is telling them do this or don't do that, and how do you interact with student athletes as well. And in preparation for this, everybody's familiar, I assume, with Dawn Staley, right? I think a lot of people would say she's doing a lot of things really well as a leader. And the way she interacts with her coaches, it's all about letting them be who they are, setting high standards, and then holding them accountable. But you cannot do that if you're not present, right? You cannot do that from, over here. And I think she is really present. Obviously, she's very present with her student athletes. And I would just say one thing that I think is really kind of cool and an example. If you did, before the Super Bowl, there was South Carolina women's basketball was playing Tennessee on TV, and we were watching a bit of it. And Dawn Staley was wearing a Seattle Seahawks jersey during the game, and she was wearing it because her point guard boyfriend plays for the Seattle Seahawks. And it's just an example of kind of showing up and leading in a way that, like, this person is on my team, this is really, really important to her, and I'm going to support it. And so I just thought it was a really interesting way of how she leads, and just made me think, not that I need to know everyone's boyfriends or girlfriends and where they're and repping their stuff, but knowing enough, that you lead in a way that shows that you care about the people that you're leading.
Yeah, I think a big part of leadership is exposure, right? Having leadership as part of leadership is having a seat at the table, being involved in the conversations, having ownership in what's going on in an organization or program. We did an example. I'll start with our student athletes. We did our first ever Leadership Academy this past August, which is essentially a professional development conference, so to speak. It's a 2-day event. They were in a hotel. We chose 2 student athletes from each of our sports, and we had leadership speakers. And we spelled leadership the way our president spells leadership, which is L-I-I-D-E-R, and that's based off of our core values, Morgan. And so each presentation was geared to one of those core values. But we did where you include the student athletes. So first we did the exposure, that's the exposure part. So the inclusion part happened a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago. My days are all running together. We had a mini mid-year retreat for our staff, for our leadership team, our senior leadership team. And we included our Leadership Academy participants in that leadership retreat, so that they could hear some of the conversations. And we were talking about culture, we were talking about those things. And so developing the young leaders, so that they can be leaders on their teams, they can be leaders when they leave the university. But also, my job as the athletics director is also to kind of develop other leaders. So my expectation of my team and my staff is not that they're gonna forever be with me at Morgan State, right? So my goal for them is to go on and if you're an assistant coach, you become a head coach. If you're associate AD, you become an AD, if that's what you want, right? But my job is to put you in a position to do that. Sometimes it is the allowing you to take the leadership role and not always telling you what the answer is or what you should do. Because one, that's why we hire you, but two, that helps you to grow as a leader. And so some of the things that we do for our senior staff, I have 3 of my senior staff that have sat in the seat at some point in time, meaning as an AD, whether they were an interim AD or full-time AD. And I learn from them just as much as they learn from me. And so part of leading leaders is also to listen to your other leaders and making decisions and doing what's best for our young people.
Okay, so for the table, your question is, what are some ways you have encouraged leadership with your younger athletes? What are some ways you've encouraged leadership with your younger athletes?
But how can coaches help you build your athletic department?
How can coaches, help, well, I think, part of it is being willing to expose themselves as well to what they don't know, and use each other's experiences. So I love it, and this happened during COVID. We did, like a lot of people did, some gatherings virtually, right? So we got all our coaches together, and we're gonna have a head coaches meeting. In this particular case, it was just head coaches. And when we finished with that meeting, the next week, the number of coaches that told me, oh, I stayed on for a long time and went into a breakout room with so-and-so, another head coach from another program. And they said, we had the great, now, I will admit, since everybody's 21 and over in here, I will admit that we also did, that was a happy hour, right? And they said that the conversation went on for quite some time, and they told me, how much they had toasted each other. But it gave them the opportunity to share what their challenges were, what they had implemented. In one case, these 2 coaches that I'm thinking of, 2 totally different sports. So it wasn't the male and female, version of the same sport. They were talking about, like, okay, what do you do in practices, for this? And I think sometimes what we need to do is use the expertise that exists already, whether the expertise is specific to your sport or whether it is the experience that you have. Right, and not be afraid to go. I love it when I see coaches who go to another coach's practice, totally different sport, what have you, and are willing to kind of expose themselves to how they do something. They just learn, like, okay, they're very, very regimented, or they're very free flowing. I love it when a younger coach will ask, another coach or somebody in a more experienced role, how to do something. What should I do in this situation? And so I think when coaches can help each other, that really, helps in ways that you can build. And not being afraid to ask. I personally try to, if I ever have a coach or an administrator ask a question about someone, or knock on my door or whatever, make sure you take the time to talk with them, right? I mean, obviously you can't be late for your own practice or something like that, but take the time and to encourage people that this is what we want. We want free-flowing questions and answers and insight.
I think coaches have more power than you think over the culture of an athletics department, because it starts with student athletes. And every time I ask the question to a student athlete or to somebody who knows the student athletes, who is the first person that student is going to go to if they have an issue or they have a concern or they have a celebration, they have who are they going to? They're going to their coaches first. They're not coming to AD Freeman Pat. They might walk by and I'll ask them because I've heard about it, right? But I'm not the first to hear about it. is the coaches. And so if you use that power for good, right? And the things that the athletics department and the university are trying to do to help with culture. You know, in our last retreat, we had our student athletes and our coaches to talk about, they wanted each program to support each other, right? Start there. We're asking for everybody else to support us. We need to start with supporting each other. And it takes the coach really to take some ownership, or coaches to take ownership in that, and not just say, send an email or send a text and say, show up to this, right? Go with them. Show up with them. Do it together, because that's part of the culture. I'll use an example. This weekend we had several big events. We had a wrestling match against the #1 team in the conference, and then we had 2 basketball teams as #1 teams in the conference. And we had a huge showing of support from our teams, from our other sports. Our football coach came himself to both, and brought for the basketball games, brought the entire team. Then took them in between games to eat, and brought them right on back for the next game. But he was there with them, you know. And this is a coach over 100 and some players that typically, you know, is not the one spending a lot of the time with the players. But I think it makes a difference. I think the coaches have a lot of influence. So if you know your AD is trying to do X, Y, and Z, you're a big part of that in saying, okay, let's go. Come on, we're going over here. This is important. We got to go support, or we got to make sure our academics is where it's supposed to be. And it's a lot on the coaches, and I understand that, which is why I love doing this type of stuff, especially for assistant coaches. But you have more power than you think.
I don't have a whole lot more to add to what they say. You have to model it first, like that is so understated, but we talk about what among our athletes, leadership by example. Coaches are no different. Ask questions of your administration in terms of where and how you or your teams can add value, and then be a team with one another. So one of the things I really enjoy about Hopkins is that I feel like all of our coaches are pretty connected to one another. I would encourage you to think about it that way, because in mass, you all can do a ton. And one of my favorite meetings every month is our head coaches meeting, and we do have some assistants in the room for that. But it always becomes very clear to me in that there's such a willingness to support one another and be a team amongst each other, and that alone, when all of you are modeling the culture, like that does more to perpetuate the culture than anything.
At your table, the question we're gonna ask you is, where can you see yourself as an improvement for your team culture? So as an assistant coach or a head coach, how can you see yourself actively improving the team culture?
What is your wish list for the department? What would an ideal culture of an athletic department look like for you? Whether it's department, staff, values, mission. So what's your wish list?
My wish list is that we're champions in all things, right? So that's academics, that's student athlete experience, that's facilities, that's competitiveness, right? I'm a competitive person, and so my thing is, and I always talk about it, it's a championship culture. And so it's not just the trophies, although they're nice and I want those too. It's more about looking at things as a champion, looking at all aspects. So that means we're working on all cylinders from A to B, getting, the strategic plan to the goal, to the championships, and everybody's on the same page, right? In our weight room, they say it a lot, same page, right? Everybody needs to be on the same page and going in the same direction, and we can see it. It's right there. We're all looking at it, and we're headed in the same direction.
Yeah, and for us at Loyola, first of all, for me, wherever I am at an institution, I have to align with that institution and what they, what I think they stand for, et cetera, and I would suggest that for most of you. Whatever, just be honest with yourself, whatever that may be. So at Loyola, as a Jesuit institution, one of the things that's really important is like care for the whole person. That is, cura personalis is something that's really important, and kind of a tagline as well as strong truths well lived. So being anchored, I would want our athletics department and everybody that's in that, including our student athletes, to believe in those things when we're making our decisions, when we're interacting with people. And so it's really important to me. Winning is important, there's no question. I had a Jesuit during my interview laugh when I said, oh yeah, winning's important. He thought that was funny. I said, yeah, no, that's important, but similar to what Dina was saying, like winning in everything, right? So college athletics is fun, right? It's competitive. It is our jobs. We're being paid to do this. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be really most excited when the people who graduate and the people that work there have great memories of their time there. And part of that is winning. Don't get me wrong, right? There are not a lot of people. If you were over every year, right? There's not a lot of people that would love that experience. So of course, the ability to be competitive is important, but that I want to help the person that's next to me, that, if I'm an athlete to an athlete, that I care about that person. I want our culture to be that if I see you struggling, that I'm the one on your team that's going to take you over to the counseling center. And that's okay, right? Because this is what we do for each other. I want our culture to be that when somebody wins in basketball, the lacrosse coach is reaching out to them saying, great game, saw you did well. Or worse, sorry to hear that you lost so-and-so to an injury. How are you doing, right? And, I want that to be our culture, because at the end of the day, 10, 20, 30 years from now, I'm hopeful that people are friends, that they want to help each other further in their life, right, when they're getting married or have kids, and that they talk about their experience at Loyola positively, right? Because they're going to be alums, and there's this legacy that you would like to continue on because they had a good experience while they were there, because they're great people.
I think I share a lot of that. I want to win at everything. I'm not shy about saying that. One of my big pie in the sky dreams when I know that we really made it is when Hopkins is as well known for medicine as it is for athletics. We're still working on it. But one day. I really love, I think departments live and die by the people. That's the bottom line. I love the people we have in our department, both athletes and staff. I love the way we show up and support each other, and my goal is always for our athletes to leave. When an athlete leaves us, we know they're going to be a person of influence, like just sort of by default. They're coming with an athletics background, they have Johns Hopkins on their diploma. No matter what path they choose in life, they will have the opportunity to be of influence. I want them to be empowered, to be really intentional about what that influence is, and how they want to use it. And likewise for our staff. I want to retain our staff for as long as possible. But knowing that some people inevitably take steps. So I always want them to think about their Hopkins experience as a place where they learned and discovered the best of themselves, and now they know how to use it for the good of others wherever they go next. That's kind of the big picture. I would also love a giant gift from Michael Bloomberg to support Hopkins athletics in perpetuity. I'll just add that to the wish list as well.
Well, at least you have a chance.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
You're
Yes,
saving
right.
us a chance. Yes, but because money doesn't buy everything, but it does buy some things, which meaningfully impact the experience of all who are part of our department. So.
Great, thank you. So for you all at the table, your question here is, looking at your staff or department, where have you seen yourself grow? This year, over the years you've been there, looking at your staff and your department, where have you seen yourself grow?